just go ahead and type in if you can hear us.
Got it. Okay. They're coming.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here this morning. I'm sure that everybody has been anticipating this meeting and thinking about the situation at hand. But today's topic, and the topic is going to be only about the DAVE program and how the bans impact our financials and also the provider's financials. And we have to look at the risks and how to mitigate those risks and what strategies would be the best for us today. The purpose of the meeting is to get your input in a structured manner. So I want to let you know that we will be opening the mic, but we're going to do it in an orderly fashion. And that will be, if you want to say something, you need to speak, please just type in, kind of like raise your hand via this is who so-and-so, and I would like to ask the question, and we will put it in a queue. We'll get to them one at a time so everybody gets to speak, and it's done in an orderly fashion, and we're not talking on top of one another. And then we'll move to some of I think right now we need to probably lay out some of the actual facts of the issue and the math that we're having and how much of a loss with the fact that we push all the monies out to the financial managers and then rely on billing going into this. And what y'all need to remember is this: we have not recouped for a while. We are adding, this COVID is really just adding insult to injury. We have experienced losses. I mean, ever since I've gotten here, I've talked about the fact that our residential losses are high because we are not able to bill what we pay out, in essence, and that our day program losses are high because we are experiencing a loss of attendance. It's pretty much going down every year. So, and if we don't take it back, then that's just a loss of 100% state dollars. So the COVID issue just is adding to that. So it's not that this is a new and novel problem. This is an addition to the problem that we have identified all along. Lack of billing in job coach, lack of billing in SLP1, it just goes on and on. So we have talked about our revenue issues versus our expense, kind of have that nailed down. It's the revenue part of things. So with that being said, we have to figure out what kind of methodology we're going to use to fill some of the gap that we're going to have coming towards the end of the year. Keep it in mind that as we analyze the boards out there, the financial managers, and looked at their position, their cash position, we're going to probably need to assist some folks getting over the June 30 switch to the new fiscal year like we had to last year. Last year we had to do it with 3 boards. This year we'll probably have to do it with 4. And we have no cash in the bank. We can't even scooch up the payments is what we've been doing. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris to start kind of laying out the basic facts of the problem.
All right, well, thank you all for attending. The first thing I'd like to get out of the way is to let you know that there are no handouts or anything at this point at the end of the session. So if you're looking for things in the meeting or looking for things with the email or anything that we sent out, there were a few files I sent out late yesterday that you all might have received. I don't know what use it is because I had to basically remove any identifying information. I wasn't going to scatter people's employee names and salaries and provider information statewide, but there was an ask for that information, so I did provide it, but it's very, very unidentifiable, and so I don't know how much you shall get out of it. But I did want to state that, at the end of this, if there is a request for documentation and we're able to provide it and ensure that we protect the identity of those that may be not appreciating their information shared, then we'll do so. The other thing I'd like to say is that I appreciate the effort everyone did take to put into that data request. I know it was not easy. I apologize for it being so late, but we had this meeting scheduled. And my difficulty is I know, we've got 38, 39 providers out there, and there's 38 or 39 ways of doing things. And so for me to try and analyze and give Pat and Mary's suggestions, it's hard for me to do that sitting here, not seeing how all of y'all are responding to this situation. And as I did receive that information, it is all over the place. I mean, there's a lot of variation in how y'all are managing this situation to control costs, which is really what it's going to be all about, unfortunately. So thank you for that. The other thing is I want to thank Debbie Wilson and Bradley Rosenblatt on my staff for crunching numbers and staying late and really helping me gather this data. A lot of it was still coming in yesterday and even last night. So we still don't have, we're still missing one board actually. So preparing for this meeting, I didn't have a ton of time to analyze what has been turned in, but I have looked at it enough to have just kind of a broad view of what you all are doing out there and maybe some issues that we might have to address. The other thing is, I think there's this concept out there that there's this enhanced FMAP number that everybody's expecting us to get, and we're expecting to get it as well. The problem is, even as of today, we don't have a number, and every time we've been asked about a number, it's changed, and every time it's changed, it's gone down, not up. So that's kind of forcing our hand here. I mean, we might have had to do something anyways if we had got a big, nice check, or a big, nice, it's not a check, but a big, nice enhancement in our revenue. But the fact remains, we still don't know the number, and the number we heard last is scary, actually. So the strategy that we're going to be pushing to you today, considering that number, this basically makes us break even still. We're not even generating enough FMAP to make back what we're talking about having to adjust for. So I don't want y'all to think, we're going to be getting all this money, and here we are being, difficult and bringing all this up, because I know we're all in a bad spot. Just like many businesses out there. If you look around you, think of all the businesses that are out there that have shuttered their doors or maybe not even come back. So the fact that we haven't had to do anything like this up to this point, is actually pretty impressive when there's hospitals and all kinds of entities struggling. So the other thing I want to throw out there is, when we finish this meeting, if you feel like your agency needs technical assistance in regards to how to navigate these waters, we will offer that to you. Debbie or I, or maybe one of our other team members, if we can get them up to speed on what we would recommend, we'll try to make that available to you, because I know when you hear some of these numbers and you're looking at what you're currently doing, you may be thinking, how am I going to do this? So we want to throw that out there at the beginning. All right, so based on that, did you have anything to add at that point? Okay. So we started the year with $157,000 in the bank. That's as of June 30. Just to give you some idea of how that compares to what's out there in the provider world, y'all had $64,279,000. So your cash is just a little bit higher than ours. 28 boards had greater than $500,000 in the bank. 11 had less than 500,000, and 5 of those have less than 100,000. So we've got 11 providers that I would consider at risk that we need to make sure we're aware of as we discuss this. The other 28, we would need to do some analysis on them too, because there's no magic to the 500,000. That was just a bright line we used. But prior to COVID coming up, we were projecting about $1 million cash balance to end this year. So that is obviously at risk. If we don't do something, we're going to be negative, and we're going to be down at the state getting chewed out, because we're not allowed to go negative. In fact, we would probably lose our jobs over it. So there is, that's true. That's what I've been told. There's a legislative budget regulation that we're not allowed to go negative. We've got to make changes if we see we're going to go negative. The state's not letting in with any extra money. The only option we have is this FMAP, which again is a moving number. So that's kind of the lay of the land as far as the financial situation. When we analyze day program, basically, and a lot of our reporting here needs some enhancement in work because it really isn't designed to analyze data the way we're doing it right now. So, I think these numbers are pretty good. I had to run a lot of different varieties of things to get what I needed. But anyways, when we ran the day program participation, 46% of all participation slot-wise is through residential folks. And they're generating 54% of all of our billings. At-home folks were 54% of the number served and only generated 46% of our billings. If you look at the actual overall attendance, we're estimating that we're running about 75% through February. Through February. Day program, residential folks were generating 88% attendance, so they were over the 80% expected, and at home was at 65%. So even pre-COVID, the at-home participation was not at the level that it needed to be, and is the reason, a lot of providers are having attendance issues. Mary mentioned that BDSN has not been taking back day program attendance for quite some time. I'm not really sure how many years are out there, probably 2 or 3, in addition to the year we're in. We've run some rough numbers. Again, I don't think it's perfect, but it's pretty close. Fiscal year 19, if we recoup those funds as permitted in our existing contract with each provider, would be $2.3 million. And if we recoup fiscal year 20 through February, prior to this COVID hitting in March, we were running a $2.5 million settlement. So there's $4.8 million in settlements that are contractually out there that are owed by providers based on our figures. Again, I'm just giving you some background information. Yes.
Susan John's asking if you could explain why the FMAP is a moving number.
Good question. The number, it might be best going to Pat or Mary, but I'll take a stab at it. In essence, the feds know what they gave the state, so the state got a fixed number. The problem is the state's got all these variables related to the folks that are Medicaid eligible. All the folks that we serve have other Medicaid services. There's other things that they're having to do over there for our population. There are enhanced services and things they've had to do, testing kits and PPE. There's all these costs they're incurring. And so they've got to carve off their cost off the top and then pass through to us. We don't know what the math is. We're going to try and figure out who over there we can talk to actually get to understand how they're coming up with the number and why the number is moving.
Another issue is they believe that CMS calculated their overall FMAP for the first quarter payment incorrectly. So they are arguing with CMS over that too.
Yeah. I would just say we don't get a 6.2% direct check. It goes to HHS. They got some math issues with CMS, and also they look at the entire system of which we're a part of. So we are at a disadvantage, but we will keep on pounding on it to get a number and why we got the number we got. But right now, we are less optimistic than we were 3 or 4 days ago that it will be a rich number. So
regardless of what the FMAP is, we still have to talk about this issue.
Right. So we have run some numbers. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody out there for everything you're doing in regards to billing day services in your residential, and hopefully you are providing actual activities and documenting them and meeting the needs of the consumers while doing that. I know we're talking just numbers here, but under all that is, our consumers getting their services. We do have 3 or 4 boards that still aren't really reporting anything or very, very little, so we're going to be reaching out. Ben, have you already done that? I know we talked about identifying those those residential providers that aren't, based on the reports they're running, they're not generating billings. There's only
a handful. We haven't followed up with any yet.
Okay.
That was just a couple days.
So I know I keep getting asked if we're going to focus on that, because I think the point is, we are all a family, and so we want to make sure we're all doing our fair share, and that we have everybody out there contributing to the dilemma and financial situation, so that we maximize the revenue being generated. But anyways, we looked at billing prior to March 16th, and the daily, this is the daily billing, yeah, daily billing was $323,000, and that's 100% dollars, of which 228 was the federal share. Post-COVID, we were billing 156,000, 100% dollars, and federal share was 110. So we're losing $167,000 a day. And on days like Good Friday, that cost us $61,000 because providers decided they weren't going to do day activity on Good Friday. $61,000. So look at that daily loss, it was much higher. We then looked at kind of a trending cumulative situation and what the impact is on an ongoing basis to kind of identify how the bleeding is affecting us and how it compares to any anticipated FMAP we may get. So let's see. At this point, did you want to?
It was in the email last night. It was the second chart in the email that you're talking about.
So the issue we have before us, we've broken it down into two pieces here. One is how do we hobble through to June 30 and get through this together and not undermine and destabilize our provider network and ensure that it's in existence when this comes back, when day services come back. And the second issue is what's our path forward long term in this situation, because I think everybody on the call will agree our old model of day service and day service attendance is probably going to not come back in the same strength that it was. And add to that the final rule focus on trying to get folks out of day programs. So I think our strategy going forward, we need to consider not only the direction we were already headed with fee-for-service and final rule issues, and also our attendance issues we were already running, but also now our situation with this new pattern that we're looking at. So that's kind of how we've broken it down. The purpose of today's meeting mainly is to address this year's issue and how we're going to get through this together, but we also want to close with kind of a springboard of looking at fiscal year 2021. Right.
I basically, the reason we're here today is we're trying to isolate the problem versus using a broad brush to fix it. In the past, when funds need to be recouped, what we did is just, if you've been around for a little while, you know that you just gotta cut, 2%, 8%, and it's usually retroactive. Here, we've identified that the day program, because they had to close, is causing us a serious revenue issue. So we want to deal with it and not just say, okay, we're just going to cut the bands by 5%. We don't want that approach. That's not a good approach in this scenario. So what we want to try to do is identify the problem, quantify the problem, and then see if we can use that information to actually fix the problem and get through the rest of this fiscal year with enough cash reserves to be able to help those boards who are going to be in trouble.
And we do recognize you've had to redeploy your day staff into residential, so we realize residential costs have gone up, and that's really where this whole analysis gets really, really difficult, because it's not, a lot of the staff maybe have been terminated or furloughed or on leave or other things, but from the data y'all turned in, the vast majority of y'all have not cut staff. You're using them in your residences. Some of you, I would say, probably in an inefficient manner, just to keep people paid. So that's got to be looked at. But and there's a lot of administrative structures and so forth where those folks are not being asked to provide coverage in their overhead per se at this point. So I don't want you to think that we don't recognize, while the day at-home services went away at this point, there's some trickle in at-home still, not many. Most of that's like job coach, support employment stuff, and mobile work crews and things like that. I think some of that's still going on, folks living at home. But for the most part, you know, the congregate folks coming in and do anything is zero. So I didn't want you to think we weren't aware of the residential cost, and that's part of our approach. So at this point, we just, okay, we'll kick it to Pat.
Yeah. Push that mic here a little bit. Yeah, I tell you, really, the main purpose today is to get your input. So we're going to throttle back on the communication side and increase the input from the 129 participants we have. But we got to do it in a structured way so that not only we can hear it, but I think as you provide input, you're affecting the other 128 people out there listening to shape their thoughts. And the way we selected to do it is we're going to have two increments of open mic. The first one is going to start as soon as I shut up, and it's going to be, we just want people's input on what they're seeing on the ground, all the issues that you think are important, so that we can raise everybody's, I guess, awareness of what's going on out there, and people can help shape the group thinking. And then we have an affirmative duty to come up with a plan forward. So we have a draft plan, but I want to emphasize the word draft, and that it's been my experience that when you have a draft and you lay it out and lay out the components, that's the step where everybody can then have a visual as to, hey, how can we make this better? So our draft is not the final product. It's the product to basically roll out there and cause people to think deeply and challenge the assumptions, bring information to bear on it. And then when we finish this meeting, that's where the input that's really going to resonate with us is, what did we learn here? What was persuasive? How do we adjust the trade-offs and variables that we have? Because if we went right to the draft right away, I think there'd be a perception like, hey, the cake's already baked, why am I providing input? When in fact, I'm telling you, there's many, many ways to move forward. And so I just want to open up the mic. We have 3 or 4 questions here.
Let's go ahead.
We'll go with the questions. And if you
want to ask something, then just say, I want to speak, and we'll
turn the mic on. All right. Let's do the questions first, Ben.
Michelle Schaefer is asking if there's any state guidance on modified day program system for community folks who want to come in, kind of like stores having the 5 people per 1,000 square feet. This might be a possibility for some providers if transportation requirements could be waived, at least something to discuss with the board of directors.
Right, there's a couple of things we were looking at. One is getting guidance from DHEC. And we know that as the governor starts opening businesses, and we know that our families are going to need our help because lots of those folks rely on the day program so they can work. So for those, and the recommendation would be that residential stays put so you have more square footage for community people and you can spread out. Some of the older buildings are more on the classroom size of things where you've got separate classes that you might be able to put 3 or 4 people in space them. And then, so there's lots of thought, but you got to think. I think there is not going to be a one size fits all. Just like our solution or any kind of thing we come up with, it is not a real one size fits all because everybody's day program is different. Some day programs are more heavy community individuals and less on the residential side. Your solution or how you deal with your staff is going to be different than if you have more residential people in your day program than you have community people. You'll have less staff at your day program to deal with. So that, again, Chris has offered to do technical assistance and analyze your staffing. You've got a lot of people here at DDSN that were providers and that can actually do some of this. So if you're a new ED and you've got one of these weird scenarios and you need some help, we'll be happy to do that. But as far as Michelle's question, first we go to DHEC and we ask what they're thinking. How can we do this? This is a vital service for folks. And then we probably will revisit the K because that is something that can be amended and add in there the ability to, I've already asked a unit question if we could break down the unit. And that was a no-go at the first bite of the apple. it might be something we can do the second bite of the apple. And then also the transportation being part of the unit. That is a huge issue, that we might be able to leave that one on the table, where you don't have to provide transportation. And if you want your person to go to the day program, you got to transport them. So that is definitely something we're looking at. But we'll go to DHEC today and ask that question.
Susan John's asking if other states also offer individual or a couple of individuals. Other states also offer an individual or a couple of individuals and are billed via an acuity level of the person supported, as well as the funding tier is tied to the acuity level. Could some of this be added to the Appendix K to offer smaller group individual options and still be able to build day supports? The smaller staffing ratios, I guess.
Yeah, you'd have to look at the needs of the individuals and group accordingly. So, but I think that could probably be done. It's a matter of the unit, not how many people you're supporting. So you'd have to be able to look at, I think if we could do partial units, it'd be easier. If we get bill in increments of an hour. But the acuity, it's always been the acuity. I don't quite understand.
You're saying if you're having a smaller ratio, we need a higher rate type. Some
Yeah,
states have
it's
different.
something to do with the rate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right now, we don't have a difficulty of care rate.
Yeah, that's part of our rate setting project.
But that
we're
was,
trying to work
yeah,
on.
that was what we wanted to do with the rate. I always wanted a difficulty of care rate. Until we have an acuity scale, you really can't drill down to you have multiple levels of rates. But I think that if we could just add one for people who are on like psychotropic drugs and behavior support plans, and that would be our barometer for that, that would be a fantastic first step. Because a lot of other services, like adult day healthcare, won't handle anybody with a behavior problem, but yet the boards are stuck handling all those folks for the same darn rate that they handle everybody, which is blatantly unfair anyway. I think some of the stuff in this, in the K, or how we talk about it, have the opportunity to talk about it, should be things that stay past the COVID issue. And that would be a difficulty in care rate. But we can talk about that now. It's not something that hasn't already been on the table, to be perfectly frank.
Liz first states that it is risky to consider doing anything except small group activities. Then she says transportation is an issue in terms of social distancing, so we could convert payments to family or transit. Conditions on participation in a small setting would be the individual needs to wear PPE, perhaps no underlying health conditions like diabetes, etc. We would also need to re-engineer our day centers, more barriers, etc. Right now, families are uncomfortable unless we can provide extensive sanitary cleanings.
Yeah, those are kind of that would be we know that's the stuff that we're asking for DHEC. We're aware of those things. That's kind of like the basics of our post-COVID world that we would be living in.
Yeah, and DHEC has guidance for childcare centers, that talk about things like that. So once we get some guidance from them, we'll definitely, share that, whatever we learn from them.
According to DSS, well over 45% of the daycare centers are still operating and still opening, and they're in a congregate setting. So, but they do deal with individuals, children, who seem to be less susceptible to this virus. So we have to take into account our folks. And again, if you're screening who can come back, you might say people with comorbidities do not come back. That we're going to be working with more of the healthy individuals, maybe starting with our enclaves first, getting them back up and running at full speed. So we do have to look at all those.
Yeah, I think you've got a lot of good points there, and I think staggered shifts and us looking at maybe you try and do morning units with one group and afternoon with another. But transportation is a huge barrier. I mean, you're talking about putting multiple people in a small confined space, so that's why getting transportation out of the unit and allowing families to provide it is key. Because you can separate them all you want in the day facility, but if you're transporting them in a tin can, you're.
Oh yeah, that transportation would definitely have to be on the chopping block for that. For now, for now.
But we're also looking at, I think, Ben, if you'll go ahead and comment, we've already said that if people are doing stuff on the weekends, that's already an option. It has been, right? It's just a desal issue.
Yes, and we'll fix that. I think DSAL already has it blocked off where you can't bill for weekends, but we're working to fix that.
Yep.
And
No
you
stand.
can do things outside your normal hours. It's just limited to 2 units a day, right?
Right, so you can, instead of like running, you can go into the evening now. And do, because you've got, you know, we all know day programs go home at 2:30 in the afternoon. I mean, that gives you a whole option for another late afternoon group of folks to come in. So you can be, y'all need to be thinking of creative ways to serve the population that you work with, because everybody kind of has a different spin on the same game. The different group of folks that you have, like I said, more community versus more residential, how are you gonna work this out?
I think this is really where the strength of your associations come into play. I mean, you really need to be leaning on one another so that y'all are generating synergies and sharing ideas with each other, which I'm sure you're already doing. I'm just saying, to rely strictly on us for these ideas, it's hard for us to communicate all that and even think through all these scenarios. But I think we've heard a lot of great ideas, that a lot of y'all may have already known. But anyways, I just think keeping that communication going is great.
And if you don't feel you're the most creative person out there, that your skills lie elsewhere, reach out and talk to people. There are a lot of really creative thinkers out there that are already doing stuff. But what can't be done is just sitting back and doing nothing. You have to be thinking.
Yeah, business models going to have to change.
Yep. Okay.
Ben, next.
Susan John mentions that staggered shifts mean more expenses as well. Jerry's asking, do you have an expectation as to when providers slowly open day services?
Staggered shifts, and what I'm looking at, don't cost more because you're talking, what I'm saying is, let's say you have, I'm going to exaggerate, let's say you have 1,000 square foot day program and you can only serve 5 people in there at a time. You're limited to 5 people. But if you stagger your shifts, you can have the staff work with another group of 5 people later in the day. That's what I'm talking about. So you're basically leveraging the space in multiple shifts, and the staff is serving across those. It's
Your
not.
staff cost does not increase because you are paying them for the time they're actually working.
So, you may, anyways. But again, transportation's a key problem there. If you're doing multiple shifts, you can't be running vehicles up and down the road very cost effectively unless you're picking folks up in a close proximity to one another. What was the second part of that? Day staff?
Expectation when providers can start opening day services.
I think that we follow what the recommendations of what we hear from DHEC, and we also follow what the governor's doing when it starts to allow groups a little bit larger than the 2 or 3 together. That I would hope that we talk about liability, yes, but honestly, I don't know how legislators cannot work on immunity from lawsuits for something like this, because this is crazy. You can't tell where or when a virus is. You can't tell if someone's got a virus and they are asymptomatic. There's no way of knowing that. So, you can't plan for every contingency, and PPEs only go so far. So I think that at some point, hopefully that'll also come to pass. It'd be something I'd be advocating for. I know that the federal government's talking about putting out a blanket immunity from prosecution unless it's just absolute gross negligence. You're out there coughing in people's faces because you want to get them infected. That's completely different than you're asymptomatic and you happen to go somewhere and people get sick. That's just, you follow all the requirements on all and then that's the best you can do. But I have absolutely no crystal ball as to when this is going to get loose. I just listen to the governor the same way everybody else does. Okay, anybody else have a question?
Ralph has one. If those in residential stay home, then our day staff will be used up there with a ratio of basically 1 to 4.
Okay, Ralph, your residential staff can be taught how to do day program objectives.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think they can.
Yeah.
There's no reason why they can't. As long as the program that you're following is in the plan for the individual that is at the day program. They're your employees. How you name them is up to you.
But they aren't usually there during the day, Ralph.
Some people do have staff during the day. We'd have to look at each board separately. I think Ralph's in one of those positions where he's got more, I would imagine he has more community people going to the day programs than he has residential folks. Whereas, where I used to work, they have more. It's the other way.
The staffing variations are all over the place. Some of y'all had first shift staff already. Some of you said, well, my lead or my house manager was working first and now they're going to watch the consumers. They weren't previously in coverage, but now they are. So I think revisiting how you're using your supervisory folks, even outside of the actual house. When I looked at what y'all turned in, and I'm not talking about Ralph specifically, it was obvious to me that there was a line of, okay, all you people, y'all aren't expected to work in the houses and all you are, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that because you've got a definite split there in what they're trained to do and so forth. But I think it's going to take some creative thinking on how to leverage all your staff that are available. Slot sharing. For example, I'm seeing there's SLP folks and job coaches that aren't really able to do a whole lot right now. But yet, when I looked at what was turned in, they're not in coverage at houses at all at some facilities. So if I'm only allowed to do job coach an hour a day or only on Tuesdays, what am I doing the other 4 days? I just think it's really a holistic approach you got to take to look at every single position and how do you get the most production out of that person.
Susan John's asking, what is the option of adding additional units per day through Appendix K? This way we could offer longer days, thus having people come in fewer days but for a longer time, and then stagger the days people come in.
I think now we're getting into the weeds of what we can do to reopen the day programs. And that'd be fine. Let's go ahead and have a discussion of that later on. But we got to get back to the money issue.
Yeah, we already had that on our list. We've got a kind of a round 2 of Appendix K wishes.
Yeah.
And that has already been vocalized, but I appreciate that.
And I think ultimately, I believe it's written as a half-day unit, so you can't have 3 halves.
Yeah, no,
But we can look at
Overtime.
if we did a 15-minute unit, it would be more flexible.
That's what we were shooting for. I think.
All right. Michelle Schaefer, 3 units a day would be helpful. We would have the ability to stay closer to the authorization level and address the needs of the community folks staying in smaller groups. Good comment. Grady, residential staff can be trained to do day program goals, but the day staff is providing the coverage. We don't employ first shift residential staff. I think we addressed that a little bit. And Jerry says, we're using our day service staff during the days at home. If we start with our community people, we won't have the staff to cover day because they are in homes.
Take all that under advisement. I mean, it's not our decision. When it comes down to it, it's not our decision.
So part of our draft plan is to consider when community services ramp back up and ability to pay for those services. We're not, strategy, we haven't gotten into any of our thoughts, but I mean, in a nutshell, we're having to assume the day programs aren't going to come back at all until after June 30. Now that may not be accurate, but we have to look at worst case scenario assumptions. The model we have or the things we're thinking of would generate additional revenue for you potentially if you got your day program units back up for your community folks. So the revenues would start coming in again. So you'd hire extra staff or adjust your residential pattern. I would say this too, if you have staff in our CTH2 and they're day program staff and you've identified you've identified community folks that staff can work with, maybe those folks don't get day service in the house anymore. They actually go to the day programs that you can pick up the other 3 or 4 people that they would have been watching if they weren't in the house. So I think there's a lot of flexibility of ways to look at that.
Josh Kern also saying the supervisors of the facilities will be the first shift direct support, and this would then relieve some of the day program staff to go back to the day program in some situations.
If boards are willing to make that decision, and we're seeing a lot of boards aren't.
Well, it's always been, when you have a snow day, it's all hands on deck. In our county, I mean, I covered shifts and I drove staff in. I mean, it was everybody does a job. And I think that we have to realize that it's usually all hands on deck for things like this. So, you'll have to, you have to look at your staff, who can do what, and then that's part of the job. And if coverage is part of the job, it's part of the job. But that's something that each board's gonna have to be willing to make.
Jason Tavener saying factors for day cuts are, to me, I think there's a typo, the increased cost in residential, who is going to pay for the in-home supports to families, and will PCA and respite increase with Appendix K?
I don't think we're gonna know at this point. But, I mean, I would assume that in-home supports is going to increase.
Well, again, if we got to kind of split the issue. We've got a current year issue and we got a next year issue. Going into next year, we're going to have to address the residential costs, like you stated. That's not something we're not, like I said earlier, we're aware of that, and we do have to do something there. I mean, we already recognize that residential rates probably needed some work anyways. That's why it was in our budget ask. So we're going to have to do something there if this continues. And if we do some of the things we're thinking, residential is going to have to be bumped. What was the other part of that? The Appendix K impact. Really, the only thing that was expanded was in-home supports, right?
Everything else.
I mean, we already had.
Well, they allowed for the authorization of personal care and respite in lieu of day programming. So people at home are not going to day programs.
And then they have to find it.
Y'all are managing that, so have you seen a big bump in that?
Yes, it is, but it's big bumps relative. I'd have to compare that to the size of the entire group. I mean, there's several hundred people with vast increases in personal care and respite. A lot of them are kids having not come from school, so I'd have to analyze that. But there are some that are due to day programs being.
But we know we spend about $800,000 a month on adult day health care, and those are closed. So there's so many moving parts to this. We've got things going away, things increasing, and trying to analyze all this. You've also got the timing issue related to waiver credit reports, the fact that you really won't see these in-home support changes until July. Thing is, we still don't have our March W-99s, do we, Ben? So even as of today, we don't know what paid claims were for March. So we don't even have the ability to analyze what in-home supports are doing right now because we don't even have data.
And that's why we've kind of broken this into two issues. How do we get the system to June 30th, which is basically literally a cash flow issue so that nobody goes deficit this year? Because there are so many unpredictable issues that I don't know if we can even reconcile them in the next month or two, but come July 1st, when we are starting to plan how we're going to finance the system for 12 months, the predictability of services and the predictability of Medicaid billings has got to become clear, or we have got to adjust our system to match what we're looking at. So I do believe all the issues raised are completely valid. Many of them are July 1st issues to how do we adjust to this changing world. So I give 100% respect to that. How they play into our decision over the next 2 months is less relevant because we're more worried about basically creating enough decisions so that everybody, DDSN and 11 boards who are at risk, make it to July 1st without running deficits.
Well, the other thing too is when we talk about the increase in residential costs, that's going to have to be verified. Because from the information that we have received from all the boards, we have found that some staff are not being used in the most efficient manner. And some decisions are not being made. And at that point, we'll just have to have that discussion with people who are saying that their costs are increasing, just one-on-one, because everybody's circumstances are different. It's really hard to say everybody's doing this or everybody's doing that.
So just to give you an example of what Mary's talked about, we have had some boards they've had first shift staff already. So you might think, well, why do they have first shift staff? Well, they could afford it, I guess, and so that was a decision they made. So when this occurred, what they really have is a savings in residential because now they're not having overtime that they're having to pay people to come in and work these. They have floater concept. So we've actually have some boards that are reporting decreases in overtime and decrease in part-time utilization, which actually offsets more than the cost related to the staff that's added to the house. So it's all over the place. I mean, when I say that, it's literally, it's the kitchen sink when it comes to how you guys are doing things out there.
We've also looked at Lori just texted me the number. There's 949 people statewide that have paused disenrollments, meaning they're still enrolled in the waiver, meaning we're still paying bands, but they're not getting any waiver services because they're paused for having no waiver services for 30 days.
Other than case
So
management.
Right. Well, not even that possibly, but yeah, I guess they would be hopefully getting some case
They better
management.
get case management.
But at the 2 service limit, they're probably not getting any other services. So again, that's more revenue out that we can't pull FMAP down. Are there any timeframes for when you think, sorry, Michelle Schaefer, any timeframes when you think we might get any information from DHEC?
We'll follow up today, and we'll follow up today.
No, it caused a problem.
Yeah, we'll follow up with DHEC today, but keep in mind that the governor's order related to non-essential retail businesses, when you talk about the 5 individuals per 1,000 square feet. So,
Right. That's a couple questions we've had here in terms of when they can start. And I think that's based on the governor's orders at this point. In-home supports in Appendix K, this is from Liz. We're already seeing here that local companies are unwilling to allocate more hours to more consumers as the caregivers are beginning to refuse to go into more homes. Good information. Jerry's saying, so I guess if I understand, we'll be short about 12.8 million per day this year. So the question I guess we don't want to ask is what is the provider's potential liability through the end of the year?
No, it's around $5 million is what we're looking at, needing to adjust for. We weren't going to go back to March 16th. We were going to kind of give, again, we're talking draft plans, so you're asking numbers now, so I'm going to get into some of the draft plan that we're talking. Basically, it'd be May 1st on, and we've run rough numbers, and we're only trying to replace our revenue is what we're trying to do, or patch our lost revenue, if you will. We're not trying to do any more than that. So when I ran rough numbers, we're paying y'all $5.7 million for Band B&I day program for 2 months. But we only need $5 million to patch our hole because we weren't billing. We were losing money. That's back to our revenue issue where we're paying y'all more than you're generating. The fact that you're only generating 65% attendance, we were taking a loss already. So we've already built in our cash flow that loss. So we're not trying to replace something we have not lost. So we're looking at $5 million, right about that amount.
Let's just go, I think, let's just go jump into our plan, because I think that will give
So there's
people,
nobody who wants to speak.
A couple people are asking just to hear the plan so that they can start discussing.
yeah, let's move to the plan.
Okay. Me? Okay. Well, so running our numbers and considering that residential and at-home day services are continue their current pattern, again, as I told Jerry, we are looking at about a $5 million FMAP loss. So in other words, we only lose the federal piece also. So not only do we have a $700,000 variance, we also, the money we pay you out is 100% money, and the numbers I'm using are 70% money. So the actual number that we're actually giving you is significantly more than the numbers I just threw out. So we're actually looking at the 30% state match, letting y'all keep that as well. Again, because it's in the budget. So when you factor in, we're just trying to replace our true revenue loss, which is the federal portion. It's $5 million. And so the plan we have is that we would take that money. I've already analyzed what everybody's funds are that they should be getting for Band B&I. Again, keep in mind how capitated funding works. These are average numbers, and you've got, I call it the Prego band because everything's in it, and you've got day program, and I have to factor in what, y'all ever heard me say that?
No.
So the day program,
That is such an old ad.
I know, it's in there. The Prego band has day services built in it on an average, so that's the only thing we can use. So if I use that, use all your actual Band B&I slots, calculate that out by board, calculate your fair share, that's your funding. Calculate the weighted average of each provider's funding to the total, apply that percentage to the $5 million that we need to recoup, then that would be the direct provider impact. That impact would be taken out of your next two checks, not the May 1st one because it's too quick. We're already working on that. So we would implement that on your next check in May, not the one in mid-month, and in June. That is about an 11% reduction statewide in the payments we're making. That will be a cash crunch for some of you. For those that would pose a cash problem, we would work with each of you individually to ensure that we can get you through to July through some type of advance. There are 11 that we know for a fact are going to need our help. So hopefully we'll get enough FMAP to be able to do that, because like I said, we were projecting $1 million surplus in cash prior to this. We're only trying to patch the revenue hole that we've got, so if the FMAP comes in and it's not going to make us whole from March to April 30th, then we're in trouble. So that number is what, about how much is that? We need at least $5 million FMAP to fund this program, in addition to what we're talking about implementing with you guys. And so then we would reduce the payment schedules by that amount, and then each provider would then let us know if they intend to, or if they anticipate fiscal issues, and we'd hook you up with Debbie and work with you to get you through to July. Come July, we realize the people that are having cash flow issues need that first July check. We don't need to be taking money out of it. So the following 2 July checks, or maybe even August, we would start recouping that advance if we had to give you an advance. And if it need to be longer term than that, then we would work with you. But the issue is we have to talk about what we're going to do in July. That could also change what assistance we might need to provide to this same group of 11 or even 12 or 13 of you.
All right, that's a lot.
But the unknown part of this is, what is our budget going to be going to the new year?
Yeah.
I mean,
Don't know that either.
we had a very favorable budget being put forth by the legislators for us, which included that residential bump, because we were talking about the Van Bees and Eyes reverting, and we knew that this is how we were going to make sure that y'all could live on what the residential rate was, because you could no longer take the monies in the capitation system from the Van Bees and Eyes and move them on over, which quite a few people do. But we don't know what that's going to be. The surplus of the state has pretty much been wiped out, and we're in lost territory. And so if this thing drags on, where our tax base is mostly basically revenue of taxes from, sales tax. So if we don't have any sales, we don't have any tax. And then that's going to be budget cuts for everyone. So at this point, it's not a matter of just saying you either get it all or you're not happy with anything. I was kind of, I didn't want to use the metaphor, but we can't be the people in the store putting all the toilet paper in our cart. We have to realize that we have to maintain the whole system. And that's what we're trying to do here. And it's not that you can just have your hand out and say all for me and none for anybody else. That's not the way it's going to be. We need to analyze the needs of each person, but each board. But if we don't have the money in-house to assist, because we let it sit all out there, then we are not going to be able to help anybody. Last year, it was a very, very close call, because we did help a few people, but we barely made it.
We had to hold back our payables, basically, is what we had to do.
Mm-hmm. We did.
We had to tell vendors, sorry, we can't pay you right now. So that's kind of embarrassing. And thank you to Melissa Ritter's dad for helping with that is now retired. But, I did want to point out, and I don't know if it got kind of lost in the shuffle, but we did say that 30% of the funding would stay with you. We realize you have fixed costs. The fixed cost statewide, based on what you turned in to me, is about $400,000 per month. And that's spread among all of you. It's made up of vehicle leases and copier leases and insurance and alarm monitoring and pest control and all kinds of things. So in that number is not depreciation. The depreciation is a number that would need to be teased apart, because a lot of depreciation is just on assets you purchase with our money. So that'd be double dipping, and we have to exclude it, you know, in settlements and so forth. So there is a 30% retention that y'all would have in your day program to help cover those types of things.
Before we open, my computer ran out of battery, so before we open up to Byline, let me just recap what Chris said. We will formally hold you harmless for any 80% rule from July 1st of last year to February. That's $2.5 million. We have not been collecting it, but I think we need to remove that doubt that we will collect it. From COVID-19 forward, you will be able to keep 100% of the band payments without any liability through April 30th. For residential. And that we will cover, during that period of time, our revenue gap is going to be $4 million of FMAP that we are expending that we are not going to get. And we believe that the 6.2% FMAP will have to fill that hole. And that's about as far as we can go on the FMAP given what we know now. So given the fact that we had no reserves to start, we had $1 million possibly positive cash flow March 1st before COVID, we are out of gas on April 30th. In order for us to make it to the end of the year, which we are the system, we've got to replace from May 1st to the end to June 30th, those 2 months, the 30%, you guys get 100% of the money, and we're only going to reduce the bands by the 70% FMAP that we require, which means 30% of every unit that was not serviced, you will still get to keep within your bands.
Plus the 700,000.
Plus the 700, right. And that way, so that totals to get us from May 1st to June 30th is approximately $5 million. We have 3 band payments during that period of time. We cannot hit the May 1st band payment, so you will get your full band payment. But that $5 million will be spread out over the last 2 band payments on mid-May and 1st of June. And when you put those together and you average it across the system-wide band payments, that's probably a 10 or 11% reduction for those 2 months. And then when we get to May 1st, as we move forward, and the forecast for the predictability of Medicaid billings and how we open day programs, there's still a lot for us to understand, and we have time before we make any decisions about going forward. So I guess with that said, we want to open lines, talk about the plan. I encourage you, there are no egos in this room. You fire away, because you need to shape our thinking. But at the same time, hopefully we provided you enough facts that we're doing this in a way so that we all can make it to the finish line and not run a deficit. And if we had $20 million in the bank, we might make different decisions. We have $0 in the bank when we started the year. So that's where we're at. That's our draft plan. We want to open it up for discussion. And then hopefully after we finish that discussion and before we leave, I really would just take a few minutes and just focus all comments. And I'd like to get somebody live online. There's a lot of experience out there as to, given what you know about your consumers, your families, what we've watched on Fox News as to how COVID-19 is going to play itself out. What is your forecast for your facility-based day programs? June 1st forward. I think we got to have some word on the street as to what that looks like to help shape our thinking for options for next year when we start to have to roll out band payment decisions. So with that.
It's been a couple questions while you guys have been talking regarding clarity about the 11%, but I think Pat addressed most of those, but just to be clear, 11% roughly coming from all bands for May 16th, June payments.
Exactly.
Not all bands, we're holding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, all bands that have day programs in it.
No,
BMS.
the calculation I outlined was I took all your band Bs and Is from your contract, calculated how much day program money is in each of those bands based on our Prego band system, and calculated how much day program money we're giving you. And instead of pulling back 100% of that money, we're only going to pull back 70% of that money based on your actual billing efficiency that we've experienced, not even the full amount that we're giving you. So there's 700, it's almost 750 stuck in that band that's paid in excess of our ability to generate billings historically.
And we're just talking about day program and P's and I's.
Right.
So, you know, because if you've got a G or an H, those are day program and a 2. They're staying alone because we are making the assumption that you are billing in your residential programs. We will reach out after we get our first month's data to those who are not doing their fair share of this lift. We will be touching them and talking to you about how we can help you get that done. We've got some boards that are doing it very well. We have a few that we haven't gotten data from, and we have a few that are not doing it very well. So we're not going to correct everybody. We're going to just help those who are not kind of sharing the load.
Mike Keith wants to know if each provider is going to know exactly how much the impact that would be. Are we sending out any information on that? Our cash flow is light, so it would be difficult.
I've got it calculated. That'll be a Mary and Pat call, but keep in mind that this is a draft plan.
Yeah.
You've got to get the commission to buy into it. This is not something we have to come up with something to start the discussion, but we're far from actually being able to implement anything. If we share that data, we can share it with each of you individually, but you got to recognize that it can change. I mean, the commission could say, we don't know if we're going to get any FMAP. Why are we not going back to March 16th? We should do the whole period of time. I mean, you just don't know. So we've tried to take a very amicable approach to this where if we see that it works and it's meeting the providers halfway, it hurts all of us. I mean, we don't want to have to do this. And if we had a more healthy organization, you know, we might be having a different discussion, but, you know, it's in a bad shape.
I just answer that question just as clearly as we can, given the variables, is if we took if the $5 million is recovered in the last 2 payments and the system-wide 2-week payment is approximately 23 million, basically what the system would normally get 46 million over the last 2 payments, we're going to, 5 million has to come out of that 46 million. So on average, I'm not saying individual boards, it would be about 10-11%. But that's on average if you want to start thinking about that. And if this plan changes, more severe or less severe, you can start looking at that 11% benchmark as getting better or worse. So that's just to give you some frame of reference.
Jerry's saying that this may impact our cash reserve, which we were hoping to use as cash flow for when we move to fee-for-service. Is the plan still to move for fee-for-service in day coming fiscal year?
We're going to talk about July in a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's...
Circle back, parking lot, that one?
Yeah.
All right. Ralph says, just a note, CMS sent something out today that day services do not have to be available to ICF's IID. Thank you, Ralph. We'll take a look at that. Melissa's asking, when and how much of an increase are you considering for residential bands?
That's July one also.
Okay. Those parking lots.
Can we maintain a list of what we remember?
I got it.
Okay. I don't want to not answer them.
Yeah. Susan John, if the FMAP comes in higher than you projected, how will that be handled?
I think it's a positive sign, and it will have to be factored in. I will make a comment on FMAP. You know, FMAP is designed for system costs and increased costs, not looking backwards to cover deficits. Given the unique band situation, and literally our entire day program was shut down overnight, there had to be some sensitivity as to stabilize the system through payments from whatever the source, so that providers can redeploy the affected personnel over to residential. And we hear you loud and clear that some boards have increased costs based on what their model was before COVID-19. And we are sensitive to that is a cost that will probably increase going forward for some boards. But 6.2% whatever that comes, is they're not going to give us a cash deposit for us to use freely. All HHS is doing is they're going to give us a number, and they're going to say, basically, the billings that you go through, you will get a credit against Medicaid billings that go through. So they'll reduce our expenses. So we don't have the latitude to just say, hey, we're going to cover this cost or that cost. I do believe it's a positive effect that could play into our decisions, but at some point, we have to recognize that from a taxpayer perspective, we are paying for services not rendered. And I think there's a limit that we can go to, and at some point, we have to make some structural changes. And right now, given our financial position, April 30th is that line. I'm not saying that more FMAP coming in would help, would maybe move that needle one way, but I can't say that we're going to do it just to cover losses. We have to do it for some business reasons, and some of the business reasons would be increased costs. So.
Well, it could be the FMAP came in higher, significantly higher. Maybe there is us looking at the residential rate. That's back to paying for increased costs, paying for service, it's not, oh, well, let's give them more money for the services not being rendered that we already cut. That's not going to be a solution. So there may be an alternative to bump other rates this fiscal year. And I think that's an Appendix K item as well that we discussed. It's potentially putting that in as well, is the ability to bump the residential rate.
Just to clarify, you would be deducting 70% of the day portion of the Band B and I for the full year contract amounts? Just those?
Just for 2 months. Just for April 30th is a cutoff. That's all we can, that's the bleeding that we can take. Once we cross the May 1st line with our projected FMAP, we're going to run a deficit and have a problem. So no, it's May 1st and June is all.
Liz is asking about the Band Bs for like the enclaves that are actually submitting billing. Are we still going to take 70% for those? Even though they haven't.
Oh, we're maintaining 30%. So until your billing gets up over 30%, then you're getting paid for it in the 30%.
Mike Keith saying, so we can expect 10 to 11% being deducted from the DDSN revenue we would receive in May and June? Question mark. And this could change somewhat based on other factors.
Correct.
System-wide.
You got to look at the gross payment too. I mean, and you got to look at just capitated. So, I mean, if you take your payment amount and say 11%, you got respite coming out of there, Medicare Part D, waiver credit reports. The number Pat's talking about is the gross number for capitated services. So, anyways.
Yeah, your capitated total payment would go down.
But I don't see any reason why the thing is, if we share the number with you, we can't really do that statewide, I don't think. I know people before us did that.
Not until it's settled. It's about as clear as but in the draft, you need to know what is the fiscal impact within some range, and that's our best estimate of the range of the fiscal impact.
That's all we've got. If anybody wants to talk, just type unmute me or something in the thing, and we can let you talk.
I mean, if y'all have any other suggestions, I mean, I appreciate the questions, but do y'all feel that the approach we've taken is what you would suggest, or are there other things we should consider?
The residential folks, we're not touching those. I'm
Right.
still hearing a little bit of misunderstanding of that. If you're building your residential program, you're getting to keep it. If you're not building your residential program, you're getting to keep it, but we're going to be talking to you. It is not fair that we've got people lifting in a much more efficient way than we have others. This is a time for all of us to be working together. If we're going to be looking at what your costs are, if it looks like you're holding on to tons of day program staff that you don't need in residential and you're inflating your costs because you're not doing some of the hard things, then we're probably going to talk to you about that. But when you are talking about billing day program for the community people, If you've got them working on enclaves, if you're billing above that 30%, I would be really, really surprised. But if you are, then we will talk to you about making sure you get paid for those people. But this is the smallest chunk that we can come up with, that we can take back, fill the hole,
Be fair with it.
and be fair. I mean, honestly, it has been done in the past many different ways, and it was never done like this. This is more of a kind of like a
Surgical.
a scalpel approach to where the problem is laying. I mean, I don't know if the others, we don't want to take back any of the other, we don't want to just take back the band Bs and Is because we don't know what's going to increase in them. So we want to make sure you have money for services, but we just heard that over 900 people aren't even getting any other services but case management. So there should be money in there to be able to handle the increase. But we'll be monitoring it and watching it. But if we have no cash in the bank, even if we're monitoring and watching it, we wouldn't be able to help. If we see somebody go wonky, because you are unfortunately stuck with a lot of band Bs that are just going up and up and up, in-home supports are going off the charts, we'll analyze that. And we'll make sure that you're not in a bad position to handle it. But these are the times that's what cash reserves are for. And we're glad that you have the opportunity, and thanks to a couple of people, to get that opportunity out there for 30, you can have 3 months reserves. If you actually did that, good for you, you've got it. And you'll be able to march forward on this. But our problem also is not just this issue with COVID, it's the post-COVID world that we have to deal with. And what is our budget going to look like when it comes down from the State House? If they say we've got to cut, we're going to have to figure that out too. So that's why we're holding those decisions. Were we going fee for service? That's what the plan was. Are we going to get there? The odds are probably not good based on whatever is coming out of the State House. So I'm not going to make that decision, and I would never make that decision in absence of everybody else talking about it and everybody else and going through the numbers. We don't say right now what we're going to do after this catastrophe. It's not going back to normal. So of course you can't just go back to what your plan was. You're going to have to create a new plan going forward. And that's what we're going to have to do. I was hoping we could do that in a partnership. Because we have to maintain our provider network. But it doesn't mean the provider network gets to keep doing business as usual, because it's just not possible in this world. So that's kind of where we are. It's not an easy truth to take, but it is the truth. Things are changing world over. Businesses that were thriving are gone. People are taking devastating hits. I don't understand why we would think that things would never change. So, and we can't come up with these ideas all by ourselves. It's not a matter of just throwing stuff up and everybody knocking it down. It's a collaborative effort to come up with something that we can live with. Are you going to get everything you want? No. What we need to do is get closest to what we want, but that solves the problem. And we need to do that in a collaborative effort. That has been very difficult. So moving forward, this is the only way that I can think of that we leave the residential bans exactly the way they are, because those people are requiring exactly what they were requiring, and we move forward with surgically targeting what we need to target. If you have a better way, Lord knows I am listening.
Well, I think your best bet is just to critically review your old day program model and get as close as you can to what you think it's going to look like once they lift these restrictions and start crawling that direction. Because regardless, that's going to serve you well. You're going to end up with a much more efficient and billing efficient agency at the end of it versus sitting around waiting and hoping that FMAP shows up or that we can do some magic with the funds in July. I think your best move is to critically review everything you're doing, reinvent yourself, reinvent your services. There's been great questions about, expanding, looking at the unit, looking at whether we can do 3 a day. Well, not 3, day and a half now, right? Weekends, can we do?
Yeah, the weekends too.
All those are great questions, and I do think they have a place in our future. Those are exactly the things, I think we rely on y'all to help us think through. You got another question?
Yeah, I've got several. Ralph has a little curveball, so I'm going to hold that for just a minute.
Of course, it would be Ralph about
We
it.
haven't received guidance from the on that. He's asking about.
Okay. It's asking about when we can open, if we can restrict older or underlying health issues, and that's kind of waiting on DHEC, right?
And also, it's money, so.
Yeah.
Whatever guidance we receive, we'll share.
Yep, we'll keep working on that.
On that.
Citizen John asked, was recruitment for 80% attendance issues a consideration?
Well, that's one of the options. That's why I threw those numbers out earlier. I think if I'm a provider and I'm hearing that, okay, so if they take fiscal year 19's paybacks, that's $2.5 million. If they take paybacks through February before this whole crisis happened, it's $2.5 million. That's $5 million. It's the same $5 million. It hits boards differently, but it's the same number. So that's an option. I don't know that that's going to be the best option, but it's an option.
Ollie's asking, can you please review exactly what bands you are taking the 70% reduction from? Are residential bands included, or is it just B's and I's, or is it dependent on if you are doing day out of residential?
I'll try again the best way I know how. Where I think we're getting muddy
Some look at the
is
email.
we're saying, well, I think what's throwing people is when I say it's 11% of the capitated payment. The number that we're taking is based on B's and I's only, but we can't take it out of your B and I payment. We pay you capitated. So if we give you $400,000 and we know 40 of it needs to come back to us, that's 10% of the payment, but that 40 is based on the B's and I's, nothing to do with residential. I hope that clarifies that. And I think that's where it was getting confused.
No touching residential.
It's the numerator and denominator. The
Just-
numerator is band B's and I's. The denominator is your full capitated payment. That's how you get the percentage.
Jerry asks, are we able to temporarily stop respite services until July 1st?
What?
There's a lot of issues with that in terms of we wouldn't be able to, might save them money, but as financial managers, but we wouldn't be able to pull any FMAP for services.
Medicaid, you're required to meet the need
Yeah,
of the
provide a
consumers.
service.
And I think beyond that aspect, yeah.
Yeah, and there's no K that's going to allow that, no.
Mike Keith says his personal opinion is we should not try to rush into changing our payment systems come July 1st. There's just too much going on, too many factors are up in the air. We need to really plan carefully and come up with the best funding plan for everyone. I never liked the bans, but we might be making a mistake if we try to rush into fee-for-service for everything come July 1st, just as 2 cents.
No, we would not be looking at fee-for-service for everything. If we do something, it'll be just day program. We're not talking about residential right now. So when we get around to the July plan, in fact, a lot of providers that have emailed us are asking, shouldn't this be a springboard to taking back the B's and I's and going fee-for-service for day programs? So I think you've got multiple opinions on that. We definitely cannot debundle the entire system. That is not being discussed at all.
Yeah, we have been talking about fee-for-service for a very long time. That is not new. We have got some cleanup we've got to do from previous years. One of the biggest problems we have had, and why we couldn't have gotten increased residential rates until this point, is not having those darn cost reports done. That has been a huge disservice to this agency. And the fact that now, while we're trying to finish up 17, we're trying to clean up the way the audits come in so that we have information that's actually usable. So, again, that has to get done. We also cannot just pass through rates to people without us having a contract with HHS. So the admin contract has to be done. And, because, my thing would be right now, yeah, let's go fee-for-service. I'm going to pass through that entire day program rate that we get paid to you guys to be done with it. But we can't, because we don't have that contract in place. So we can't just decide what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. I think my preference would be to leave those residential rates bundled for a while, based on that, if I could possibly ever get the outlier dollars back into the match game, that would be awesome, because that would dump more money into our system that would be matchable. What we have to really think about and have a real strong voice about is getting all the state-only dollars out there back into the match game. That's one of our biggest problems at this point. So many problems have been just fixed by throwing dollars, 100% state dollars at them, that it is causing us huge problems. And when we ask for appropriation, we basically ask for a third of what we expect to need, because we are telling everybody we're going to match this money. What we need to do is kind of sweep the floor, get all the 100% state dollars together, and get that back into the match game. And that would be, so, you know, in my ideal world, the acuity of the person would be something that we can match. So if we talk about a day program, level of care being higher for some folks and lower for other folks, then that money wouldn't be a Band B outlier. It would actually be in the rate, and we can match it. There's so many more efficient ways of using our money. And Mike, I agree with you 100%. I am not going to be able to make those decisions. We, as a system, are not going to be able to make those decisions come July 1, because we've got to survey what the landscape looks like post this debacle we've been in. You know, we have to look at, our family's going to come back to day programs. Our day programs, the way they're written now, does it need a waiver amendment? Does it need to be changed? There's got to be ways of looking at this that are just gone. We thought we had problems before, they just multiplied. But if we don't clean our mess up going into that, in other words, getting the cost reports done, knowing what the actual cost of services are, fixing definitions, we've got loads of things to do. So as I would love to look at what every other state is doing and how they're handling their Ks, you have to remember, they've got a different payment system than we have. Very few people are in this band world that we're in. So if somebody else has a better way of handling this day program deficit, again, please let me know what it is. We will not be making decisions come July 1. Don't worry, Mike, that's not going to happen.
Lois Duras asking, what time frame do we anticipate for the desal being changed to allow weekend billing? We don't have a time frame on that, but we will put it in as soon as we get some definite dates. We'll put it in the SITREP and send it out to you guys. So
Until then, is there a process to follow to build out?
We can come up with provide.
Can they put that on that report or something?
go manual bill.
We'll push out some interim guidance
Okay.
relative to
Great question.
allow.
Rufus said we'll put out interim guidance. We know you can't hear him.
Have that low voice. All right.
I think right now, though, you guys should be in the planning stage for that, not so much the actual doing stage, because we are still waiting for some guidance as to how to do this in a safe manner.
And keep in mind, when it does happen, if you're doing more than 5 days a week, you would need to get authorizations changed by case managers. Jason Towner says, do you have a number for one-on-one outliers that were based upon staffing at one-on-one at the day program? I'm assuming most of this is stopped.
I don't understand. You don't have, do you have the one-on-one at the day program? The day program's closed.
Right, that's what he's saying, it's stopped, so he's saying that's additional. I'm assuming that he means that's money that's not being used, cost that's not there
Right, so
anymore.
it shouldn't be being paid until that service resumes.
And that's actually a great question. We'll need to look at that, Jason, because basically what you're saying is, are we going to pull those outlier funds back because
Yeah, we should.
they are not being one-on-one services at this point? Problem is, the outlier most often is not just a day program component or just a residential component or just, it's multi-layered. That's a good question.
Band B ones.
We're going to need to analyze that.
If it's a band B for the day program, it would be.
Right.
So
Well,
my feeling about outliers, if it's not being used, it stops.
Well, there are Bambi at-home outliers where they come to the day program, but then they have high services in the home that triggers them up over. So if you pull that full outlier, but they're still getting those in-home
It's just,
services,
again, but we're only
you gotta
talking about day
bifurcate that.
programs.
So
So anything that would be used at the day program.
we don't do our outlier numbers that way. So, okay.
Well, I think the one that he's talking about is for the day program.
Well, I know which one he's asking about. He's not the only one. And
Yep, there's a few Bambi outliers that have to do with high PCA costs that go well over the amount.
Melissa says she thinks our approach is too general. They only have 16% of our band Bs and Is that receive day services. Is this the standard across the provider network? If not, it would be appropriate to reduce the standard percentage across the board.
I mean, we don't have Babcock Center Band Bs and Colleton Band Bs and Burton Center Band Bs. You know, if every provider, what you're stating is that we should take more from other providers than yours potentially because of your participation level. You know, that calculation could be done, but you know, I don't know if that's the avenue to go. I mean,
Are we not looking at this board by board?
what she's saying is so like in a Band B, there's $8,000 something built into that band for day program. That's based on statewide utilization and participation in day services. If they're over or under that statewide average, it impacts them higher or lower based on how they compare to the average. So you're going to have half the boards that are over the average, half under. And so, well, that's actually the median or whatever. But anyways, you're going to have fiscally a split. And so we would take more money from these providers and less from others. She's saying she's in this less from others bucket.
It's an option.
It's just what that does to everybody else that's above the average is that you're not losing 11% of your payments for May and June. You're losing 15, 16, 18, whatever. Because again, the net number has to be 5 million. And so if we distribute the money differently, right now the numbers I'm using are statewide average day program funding in each band, not provider specific.
Right. Anything more on that? We get Nancy Rodney says the day portion of our band Bs and Is are also calculating at 16%. She's given in her echoing that feedback from Melissa. If our day portion of band Bs and Is is calculating at 16% of our total cap contract, does that mean that we will have 16% reduction in revenue in May and June, not really an 11% reduction for in other words, loss of day program revenue?
It's the numerator denominator issue.
First of all, I don't know how you're driving your percentages, so I'd love for you to share that with me after this meeting. If you can email that to me so I can run my own numbers. You got to consider job coach participation. You got to consider adult day health. You get a day slot for adult day health, although you're paying a third-party provider for it. You may be a provider of day services, but you're not the financial manager for that person, so you're not getting the band. You're billing the day service to the financial manager. There are multiple aspects of these percentages, and it's not as simple as printing something out and dividing two numbers. There's 5 or 6 pieces you got to pull. So if you want to share that information, I'll be glad to look at it and get back to you. I'll kick it to Debbie and let her do it.
All right, Jason's trying to help us find cost-cutting measures. If Alliant isn't doing the same level of QA, has that contract been revisited?
He wants to know, are we, to save money as a state agency, are we looking at what Alliant's doing and the frequency and maybe looking at reducing their contract and what we ask them to do. Now, that's not a solution for May, but
It's always on the table.
Everything's on the table.
But I mean,
So,
we have been revisiting what Alliance doing.
Yeah,
We're in the middle of redoing their process now, so it would be.
There are some things we have identified that's like, are we paying Alliant to actually do this? So we are trying to identify things, but when you're in a contract with a vendor and it's a 5-year contract, you have to look to the contract and see what changes are allowed. I think we're close to, a period to bid that out again. So yeah, we're definitely looking at, we're analyzing every contract we have. Rufus continues to fund things, don't you? So we're controlling our expenditures very well. If you have been watching the commission meeting, our budget, we got almost $900 million in approval, which is called our authorization. But because we can't leverage our state dollars properly, we're limited to leveraging only $770 million, I think. And we are 5% below our budget on expenditures. So we are managing our expenses extremely well as an agency. The problem is we can't get the billing done out in the provider world done efficiently. We've found all kinds of holes, and some of that has to do with Medicaid eligibility also, which we're working on, and then some of it has to do with our rates. So it's a multiple-pronged issue when it comes to revenue. But any ideas you have to save money, we're open to that too. But yeah, we are looking at the Alliant contract.
Okay. Susan John's asking if case management can authorize more than 10 units of day services per week. I believe they can. Lynn, Sig, you're on the call as well. If I'm wrong on that, correct me. But skimming quickly, at least the day activity manual, I don't see anything prohibiting that. But we'll clarify that as we talk about desal and send out further guidance. Ralph says we have to show Alliant the hours worked one-on-one. I guess that goes back to our talk about one-on-one outliers.
Okay.
Melissa, again, circling back, says it's logical that costs associated with those bands will go down because day programs shouldn't be charged back. However, for the other B's and I's charges very well increase. Back to her talk about her lower percentage.
Sounds like she's saying that her non-day B's and I's are going to go up. Which they may, and I think that is
something we have to keep an eye on.
Well, that's another reason to consider fee for service for B's and I's in July, because then we own that liability, not you. And so if we flip those bands, which is a whole nother conversation, we don't need to get into that right now, but I'm just trying to set your mind around this. If that is decided that that's what we want to do, that becomes our problem, not yours.
That's all we've got in chat. If anybody wants to talk, let us know.
Before we disconnect, I'd like to at least get somebody to comment on, you guys are out there with families and consumers and on the ground. What's your view of facility-based day programming throughout the summer and fall, given all the factors that are in front of us? I've talked to some providers and they definitely have some strong views of what they think's happening. I like the group to kind of hear other people's views so that we can start shaping our July 1st thinking.
And if y'all want to speak, we can unmute you. Instead of you having to type your questions in, just type to Ben that you want to speak and he'll unmute you.
Always asking, if we take B's and I's divided by the total capitated funding, we're calculating that we will be at 25% reduction, not 11%. Is that the right way to calculate?
Got it. Send me your information. I'm not in a mind right now to be doing all this math in my head without data in front of me. If you send it to me, I'll be glad to look at it.
That's not the total B's and I's you're talking about anyway. It's the day portion.
2 months. 2 months a day.
2 months.
Just 2 months.
All right.
70% match. That's all we're going for.
Shell says if we can build for more than 10 units a week, we could start ASAP with residential consumers to help offset the community reductions due to space issues, modified service model. Absolutely. So we'll try and have guidance out to you by the end of this week in terms of that and give you a timeline or a way to build without desal if we need to.
I'm not correct, there's still an executive order limiting mass, congregation in mass of prohibited for more than 100. But then, like I said, the order that was,
Can y'all hear Rufus?
Come on, Barry White, come on now.
we're going to issue guidance.
Okay.
What was your guy? All right. Max Abilities has some families who are wanting to attend, some who are hesitant. We are hesitant about some who require a lot of care and have health risks. So again, yeah, we just need to follow DHEC and guidance on opening. Susan John has asked to have questions. I'm going to unmute you, Susan, from here. You may need to also unmute manually on your side to speak. Should be unmuted on your end. Just need to, on our end, you're unmuted. Just feel free, you need to unmute from your computer. Try it now. You need to unmute from your end. Show that you're in.
Hello?
Got you.
Hello?
Hello?
There. 25 buttons later. Real quick question, just to be clear, of the band Bs and Is, are you only calculating that reduction on the folks who are receiving day services or on all band Bs and Is?
The B and I has components built into the average funding, of which one component is day program. We are taking the amount, regardless of where we end up computing the number, it's going to end up with 5 million as the end answer. So how we get there, we can talk about, and how it impacts individual agencies. But in the end, we've got a 5 million billing hole, then we got to get the money off the street. So the band system is full of flaws. Every one of y'all will recognize that. We inherited that system. We're trying to get out of it. The problem is, the only thing I can do right now is say, okay, Band B, inside you is this amount of money. Inside you, Band I, is this amount of money. The band system does not lend itself to crawling into each individual service for each individual person and determining how their money is spent. It's an averaging thing. So that's the only model I know to use.
The reason I'm asking that question, Chris, is so if somebody is receiving personal care services and respite care and durable medical equipment and all of that, I'm trying to understand if that 70% is going to be drawn off of that Band B as well, because we're just trying to figure it out.
So there are other ways that we can calculate this. It doesn't seem logical to me to do it any other way, just because of how the band system was built and how it's modeled. You know, an argument could be made that we should look at each Band B, and if we're putting out $14,800 is being spent for the year, that we should pull back the full variance because they're not getting anything. There are probably as many variables and solutions that we can come up with to come up with the same exact number, and the only thing that's going to change is the impact by provider. If we want to remodel the allocation and distribution of the total in another manner, we can certainly consider those.
Pre-COVID billing, post-COVID.
If I gave each of you the number now and then gave you a number after we agreed as a group to do it a different way, half you're going to be really upset and the other half you're going to be happy. So I guess to determine which one. Do you have a question? So Susan, say, did I answer you, or do you need to double back and
No,
clarify?
I think you answered it, and I think there's some other thoughts in the feed, so I'll let you go to that.
Okay.
To know if it's this figure or off of the other figure. Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at the payment schedules that you're currently getting, if you're looking at the payment schedules that will be coming out in the next few days, actually, the figure that they're looking at is the very first section of that payment schedule, which says capitated services. They're saying 11% of that total. They're not including any of the other payments that you're getting or the deductions. It's just that first section that says capitated services.
And just to be clear, the 11% is just an estimate statewide. You're asking, how do we get a number that we can start working with? Your number may not be 11% of that. Again, it's going to vary. If you've got a huge residential program and a small, we pay out $46 million a month. We know we're taking back whatever number per month, or that's the plan, $2.5 million. It's just an exercise of math, dividing the two. How that comes out to each provider is going to vary as well, because we're talking averages. So yours could be 15%, it could be 8%. I mean, depends on how big your day program is in relation to the other services you use for the cost of that. Yeah.
All right. Melissa has a suggestion. What about a combined approach that does take back some portion from those that did not meet attendance for perhaps the first half of fiscal year 20? So Liz agrees with Melissa.
How do we build consensus?
Kind of combined.
Consensus with our provider network.
It's an option.
No, I was asking, so I don't want to waste a lot of time running numbers. These aren't easy calculations to do. But I mean, that's something we can consider. I just need to know, do we have to ask other people what they think about that, or how do we do this? Because
we could do a survey and just say, which of these models do you think is the most, before we run numbers and have specific provider information, so we can't really tell you, but based on you as a provider, we could.
There's many options out there, but at the end of the day, when you run a capitated system, when you bill something, you got to have costs behind it so that we can have CPE to cost settle properly. So if you are losing day services, the costs that need to be reduced are in day services. So when we collect this $5 million, how we proportionally do it, I think there's many options we talked about. We got to remember, the more we align it appropriately with the current day services being cut, meaning if you had a large day service program, you had a lot of large costs behind it. If that revenue is gone, well, then those costs have to dissipate. So I think that is a driving factor in Chris's analysis, that we got to align the payment, the band reductions to closely match the services being reduced, so that the people affected can reduce their costs, so that we keep the CPE corresponding to the service being reduced. So that's, I'm not saying that we can't come up with variations of that based on a number of factors, but that seems to be our most equitable way to obtain the $5 million FMAP gap that we're facing.
The other issue is the conversation that has to be had, that I'm not 100% sure how much PCA, how much in-home supports, how much of that, until I see the reports, and we're so far after the fact getting that data from HHS, but I do know that the day programs are closed. So basically, we're handing out money to pay for a service that is not happening. So at some point, the conversation is, if I'm going to identify a number that is easily identifiable, that would be the one. I also know that adult day healthcare are closed. I don't know what your savings is going to be in July from that. The fact that you're not paying all that adult day healthcare money. I don't know what it's going to be, but because I don't know what it's going to be, even though they're closed and you're getting money to provide that service, we're not touching that. We're just looking at the day programs that we operate and going on the historical data that we have. I just, that's, other than just going across the board and saying, okay, we're gonna shave everything 2 or 3%. We kind of tried to keep it as small as possible. Not to say that it's going to stop there. I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen when this all ends. I just know that we can't end in a deficit, and I can't have boards not be able to make payroll in June. So those are the two things I'm looking at. The splitting of the hair, which is kind of weird because some people are follically challenged, but the splitting of the hair over here is left to the money guys, to the people who figure this out. If you think of a better way to figure that out, by all means, let us know.
Well, the problem is, and I agree with that, Mary, it's just invariably, if you're going to benefit from your suggestion, you're going to make that suggestion. If you're going to lose more, you're not going to make that suggestion. So what you're going to have to do is come up with a solution that's equitable to you, knowing that, it's a zero-sum game.
We need $5 million.
Wherever it comes from and whatever the model is, the number ends up the same in total statewide. It's how it's distributed. So the thing we've got to figure out is, of course, people vocalizing, and I'm not saying, Melissa, you've done the calculation and know where you would end up. I don't think you've done that. I think you've just thrown out ideas. So I'm not accusing you of taking a position just because how you benefit. But if that's something a bunch of providers are interested in, we can do a survey and see if that's what they want to do. I do have the numbers. These are very rough, so we'd have to get to where they're actually good numbers on these settlements. But yeah, it's $2.5 million each year, and 11 providers, according to these numbers, 11 providers hit their attendance of 80%, and the rest didn't. So
You can do it that way.
Lots of questions popping in. Susan John says she thinks she needs to make sure that they're calculating the attendance based on actual units authorized, as there are people who come only 2 to 3 days per week and not always 5.
Well, I have to answer that because that is a true concern, voiced a long time and many times since. But it's incumbent on the provider to provide that information in a timely fashion so that the contract can be amended. So I know that in York we were doing it on a monthly basis. You can't wait to the end of the year to send all those numbers in, and all the authorizations have to correspond with that. So if you're saying they only come 2 days a week, and you didn't fix the authorization, not much we can do about that. But if you're keeping up with it, then yeah, those contracts were amended. As far as I know, they were, because that's how we did it when I was a provider. So I would think that it's incumbent. Say for snow days, a training day, you can fix that contract. But
well, the problem is a lot of the data we're getting, according to Deborah, she can't adjust. We don't have a standard process for people to follow, and she's getting, honestly, just a bunch of stuff that's not even accurate.
Yeah, you have.
And I'd have to give you details, but she's given me many examples. I'm like, oh my God, okay. So we got, anyways.
But if, again, it's just like if someone changes a service, it goes from career prep to day activity. You've got to change the authorization. If someone's only coming 3 days a week and it's consistent, you change the authorization. And that's how we were told to do it, that your authorization and your request for changing units have to match up. So if it was done properly, then by all means, we adjust the contract for that. But if it wasn't done properly, then no.
All right. I'm going to read this because my head's hurting trying to figure it out. This is from Linda. She's got a math thing for you.
Why don't you just unmute her?
Well, no, it's clear. It's a mathematical thing. Could we take the available units for day programs for May and June times the number of band I bands that you have times the day unit rate of 27.5 and then apply the 70% to that number? That seems like a more logical approach to targeting the closed program. Another option to consider.
I think we're going to have to look at it. Would it be helpful Is there any way we can get a number to people? Or what their
So-
number would be?
This is my we can look at that, but here's my answer to that, is that we don't fund day program on a per unit utilization of day program. We fund day program on a statewide average basis in the band. What you actually are driving in attendance and authorizations has been way off. We just said you had 65% attendance.
Yeah.
You should have 100% attendance. So if we run that, using 2750 isn't going to work. Number one, we get paid $31.29, not $27.50. Number two, 2750 is not what's in the Band B. It's the basis for what's in the Band B, but Band B is based on statewide utilization of all people in that band. So that may seem like a solution. It can be used as a denominator if you want. I mean, that may be a way. I think what you're getting at there is like, if we look at, instead of assuming all Band B's eyes across the state are used equally, that we look at the actual utilization by those folks, by a provider, and target it to them based on a percentage. We can't do it with the 2750 though. That's the part of your equation that I have problem with, but otherwise it would work to do that. Do you understand what she's asking?
I think a lot of these parallel each other, and they may wobble one way or another. I think ultimately that we have to get a plan. The methodology to address that gap in some of these things, I think, are open for discussion, and we might narrow it down and roll it
I
out.
think that's a good,
It's not,
I think that's a viable option. I mean,
Can we
it
run
kinda-
those numbers and let people see what their numbers are? Maybe some of this discussion would stop if people knew what kind of, if based on this, because we,
Well-
I keep hearing the talk
Yeah.
about resident. I mean, it's obvious that some folks aren't quite there. But if we could give them an idea of what their number might be, what the ballpark is, they might
Well,
say, oh my gosh, that's not
it's-
what I thought it was gonna be.
It's a percentage of the state as well, so we can't use a per unit rate to multiply times these units you're talking about us calculating. You're talking about how does your board stack up with the board down the street as a percentage of the statewide, and how do you get your allocation of the shortage? So, I mean, I think it's a really good suggestion. I think we should probably look at that.
sure.
We've got to present the commission some ideas,
Yeah, and I
so
think that's actually.
I think that we can do that.
Because that actually goes back to kind of what, I think it was Susan was asking about, well, how do you target the Band B for folks that are not using day, blah, blah, blah. So that's actually, but what we would have to do, I think you said something about run May and June. It would have to be actually January and February or something like that, not after this, because nobody would have any units at that point. But yeah.
That's fair.
Okay, we can run those numbers. And I think it'd be more fair to look at the 8-month period, actually,
Yeah, I think so too.
not 2 months.
What programs are absorbing the cost for the in-home services and extra staffing in residential? That's for Brantley, sorry.
But what?
What programs are absorbing the cost for the in-home services and extra staffing in residential?
Well, in-home services, when you talking about the in-home supports, it's in Appendix K?
Brantley, do you want to unmute and clarify?
If it is, you gotta go.
But you guys.
It'll
keep
be,
up.
it'll
Can
be.
you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I was just talking about during the COVID stuff that we're having the extra staffing in the residential, and we're trying to do the in-home services for the day program to get that billing in. So I was just curious what program's paying for that.
All right, so there are some accounting nuances to that I have yet to issue, just because I know I'm going to get a lot of blowback. I already did. I made a comment in a finance meeting and immediately got 2 or 3 emails or calls about it, disagreeing or seeking clarity. And honestly, I don't have all the answers, so that's why I haven't got anything out yet. But in a nutshell, if day services are being generated in a residential setting, it's about the activity, not the location of the activity, that drives the cost recognition. So these should be day program costs to the extent they're day program activities, even though they're physically located in the house. We had a first shift staff that has always worked in the residence, and now they're in coverage providing day activity. That cost for that staff is a day program cost. We are leaving you all the day program money in the residential band. We're not touching it. So that residential band still should be separated budgetarily between the two different distinct services. And it's fairly complicated math and journal entries and accounting. And I've honestly just not had time to work through all the variations and give guidance. And I don't know if that answered your question, Brantley. If not, let us know.
It did, thank you.
But I do need to get some guidance out in that and want to put it in one of these sit rep reports. I've got it drafted. I've just been reluctant to issue it because I don't think it's foolproof yet. Bless you, Rob.
Bless you.
All right, Grady's stating, if the statewide capitated dollars is 45 million and I receive 3.9 million, I am 8.7% of the state budget. 8.7% of 5 million is 33,000.
I don't have a calculator or it. Same answer. If you want to send me numbers, go for it. I can't do,
He says
I got vertigo, and anytime I start thinking hard, I start getting dizzy. I'm being honest. Right now, I'm getting kind of a little dizzy and lightheaded.
Got it rough.
So if you'll send it to me.
ultimately he's saying though that his numbers do match, and that's roughly close to the 11% for him.
Thank you, Grady.
Yeah.
And we'll close on
I would still like to see your math. That way, if someone else asks me, I can say, well, here's what Grady did.
Ralph says, is this proposed to start with the second May payment? And if so, will that second payment have the double hit, or will it be the same as each of the two deductions in June?
Well, the payment in May that we're talking about is actually your first payment for June, and your second payment for June is paid in June. So it'd be both June payments would have equal amounts taken out of it. When we say May payment, that's the month we're paying you in, not the month that the payment is for. So your June payments are, one of them comes early in May and one comes actually in the month it's for. And it would hit both of those equally.
Evelyn's asking, when will we know what our allocation is of the shortage? Will we get it before it's deducted?
Well, people are asking me to reconsider the calculation and allocation of the number. We have a finance committee meeting that's an open meeting. If y'all want to attend, it's Tuesday, I think, at 3 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. We will be bringing before the Finance and Audit Committee our suggestions, and then we're going to have a called commission meeting sometime after that, and that's when we'll know. But in the meantime, I've got to go back to the drawing board. I've heard a couple pretty good questions. I've heard some good challenges. I got to rethink some things. So I think the best we can do right now is use Pat's 11% estimate just as a target.
Thank you. That's all the questions right now, other than the parking lot ones from earlier.
What are the parking lot ones again?
Had to do for fee for service for day next fiscal year, which we
Okay.
somewhat digress, and then increase for residential bands.
You hear all the difficulty we're having in the discussions about bands and the allocation of, well, they don't really go to the day program, they use these services. I agree. That's the problem with this band system. It's totally developed in a manner that ratably every single person in South Carolina that's funded through that band is getting the same service distribution, and that's just not true. Some services are more, you've got outlier considerations, you've got all kinds of factors that need to be factored in. My big push at this point is to really focus on band Bs and Is and pull those back if we can. That's what I'm suggesting, and Pat's back here now. They're asking the parking lot questions that Ben had for us. That's my push. and you know, I'm not the deciding factor. I'm the one kind of making suggestions here. So what we were hearing before this is, oh my God, these at-home services are going through the roof. You're drowning us out here. All this money that we used to get is disappearing in these bans. What are y'all going to do about it? Well, if we pull the B's and I's back, you won't ever have to say that again. We might be asking you questions about service authorizations and recommendations, but the fiscal impact of that is on us. Additionally, if we do that and leave residential alone, you'll get paid actually for the day services you provide. There won't be any questions about why are you pulling back X when we don't do Y, and you provide a unit, you get paid for the unit. So that's my strong suggestion. What Pat and Mary and the committee and commission decide to do about it is, you know, yet to be determined. We're also open to other recommendations from you all, but I think the math of the bans creates a lot of the questions that you just heard that we can't answer, and there's really no legitimate answer for it. So in a Ban BI scenario where we flip those, you would no longer have waiver credit reports. You would no longer have respite recoupments. You would no longer have Medicare Part D recoupments. You would bill DSAL like you do state-funded community supports. You would bill board-provided waiver services like you do HASKI waiver or state-funded community support. So that is what I'm looking at for July. I just don't know if we can make it happen. I don't know if Medicaid needs to approve it. We've got the admin contract issue. There's a lot to figure out. So that's kind of, if we don't do that, then the only other thing we can do is maintain the B's and I's, but do a similar calculation that we're talking about now and not pay you for day program, give you the 30% maybe. And then if you go over that percentage, maybe we have a way to pay. It's kind of like a safety net program like case management, where we establish the baseline at 30%. And if you go over it, we pay you extra. And if you don't, you keep the safety net. So that's kind of a scenario that we would look at if we don't have the ability to flip the bans. And what was the second question?
Jerry asked about fee for service for day next fiscal year. Melissa asked about increase in residential ban.
Oh, and residential rates. So we recognize that out there the residential costs are higher than statewide. Again, I know some of the folks I worked with when I was out there, this isn't a true statement, but I know statewide it is. Residential costs are higher than what we pay. And so we had a budget request for July 1 to put $10 million in residential bans. We weren't going to keep any of it. All that money was going to go to providers. That was going to address existing costs in the residential structure that we see. With this conversion to day program, now, granted, these are still day program costs. Y'all are talking about residential costs going up, but to Brantley's question, this really isn't a residential cost. That might be where you're capturing it because they're physically working there, but that's not actually correct accounting. The cost overall, though, if you have to provide this in a 1-to-4 ratio versus 1-to-6 or 7 in a day program, your costs are up. There's no doubt about it. So we would have to figure out how do we increase rates in general if we can't get back into a more congregate setting for day services. Did I answer that correctly?
You did.
So we need y'all thinking about July too. So the purpose of this meeting was to talk about now, this current year, but we can't wait till, I'm working on July type stuff right now, trying to figure out what we're going to do. If you have, I heard some really good recommendations, so this isn't just me puffing smoke at you. If you have good ideas, share them, because I do the best I can to come up with scenarios and solutions, but I recognize there's a lot of unique things out there that I can't actually wrap my head around and fully grasp until someone brings it up. So I do appreciate that feedback. Are there any thoughts on Band B&I that anybody can speak up? Or I'd like to get a gut feel from the audience what they think about what they've been presented in regards to July. Pat also asked what people think the services are going to look like come July, and we only got one answer.
Facility-based projection.
So if y'all could really give us some feedback, we can unmute you if you don't want to type it. It's very, very important information.
Hey, Chris, this is Elizabeth. I agreed with Michelle that we all think we could operate in a small group setting, given the guidance from DHEC, et cetera. But that just, as we know, drives the employee ratio costs up. So having the ability to bill more in smaller units would be flexible. None of us wanted to go to the hourly units, but maybe that's something we should consider for the future. And billable for transportation as well, if we're going to provide it. So.
Yeah, when we're doing the day rate setting thing, we were already talking, and I don't know if we presented to y'all or not, but we wanted transportation as a service for day outside of the day program rate, like adult day health care has. So the problem is a lot of these changes are plan amendments.
Or Appendix K, of modifications.
Short term.
They're short term.
But hey, COVID-D's going to be with us for a while.
And that could be, the next 3 months, could be the next 6
That's right.
months.
Yeah. Immediate alternative.
Yeah, we agree that probably it's half of the individuals would even attempt to come in on a part-time basis, given the feedback we've been getting from families, their lack of comfort with sanitary guidelines and comfort with who they're around and who's been with whom, and all of that is playing in their minds. So I don't know if our attendance will jump up at all unless we can do small, one staffed to 2 to 3 individuals on a community. That's the only flexibility I think that would make people comfortable, is that there are no large groups of any kind.
Okay.
Yep. Jason Taverner, you can go ahead and unmute if you'd like to comment.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity. This is a forward comment. I guess as far as I'm thinking, I can't really see a near future where we're returning people to our day program. Mary made a very good comment about liability waivers, but it's even more liability. It's, the face of the community, trust, all these things where our families, we bring back a group of people and we have the worst case scenario. I don't know that we recover, that structure recovers from something like that. So that's definitely on the mind. Kind of what I would like to see is opportunities for, of course, more, I think it's final rule driven in my mind. I'll tell you what we're experiencing in Laurens is, the folks in our residence are doing much better than I anticipated. We've been doing a lot of activities, doing a lot of different creative things. I hear that across the provider network. We're not alone in that. But I didn't see a spike in behaviors like I had anticipated just out of boredom. I was really worried about that. So that was promising to me. I like the idea of either group respite, and I mean 4 or 5, or group, and I'm gonna call it companion, but there's probably a better term, or I don't know if that's the right service, but not, one of the things that we can do is with social distancing, I guess, but some kind of socialization is what I think is going to be a big key. And then funding appropriately job coach, letting us, be aggressive with employing people as those opportunities arise is what I'd like to see going forward. I'm not really looking for bring everybody back and we do the old business model again. I just don't think it's there. So thank you for a chance to comment.
That's a great.
Yeah, those are great points, Jason. On the job coach, the rate that we have out there right now isn't going to be supported by HHS if we move fee for service. I don't think it's really high. The issue is the job coach funding in the band system. Is that what you're asking about? Or are you talking about in a fee for service?
I bet.
No, I was thinking a fee for service, because I'd like to be more aggressive with it is what I'm finding. As I talk to the folks we're supporting, and I don't have the number, so I can't give you a rate, but I was thinking of a fee-for-service rate, not what's in the band.
But you can't be aggressive in the capitated funding system now? Like, what's the rate? You're saying until we incentivize?
I think, I love the rate you got right now. I understand it's not sustainable. The fee-for-service rate, not the band rate. I think if that was the rate going away, you'd see a lot more people employed, but I understand it's expensive. I think, and what we've been transitioning to is more work, and we've been very successful here in Lawrence. I know others are across the state. But the next round of employment efforts that I'd really like to do will be a lot more one-on-one, and they'll take longer to be successful, is what I'm experiencing.
So noted.
Tyler Rex has commented, he says his opinion, rip the band B and band I Band-Aid off if it doesn't create an impetus. If this doesn't create an impetus, not sure what will. Susan Johns says overall the numbers will be down even more than likely in July. We also need to address the issue of financial management for other providers.
What is that? Oh, you're talking about, yes. I mean, Susan, I think you're saying where you kind of go around your elbow to get to your hand, where, you get the money and then they bill you and you pay them and they bill us and all that kind of craziness. Yeah, we're looking at trying to unravel some of that now, actually. We've got some projects we're working on in finance trying to revisit some of that craziness. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Susan agrees with Jason. They've seen better health outcomes for some of our consumers due to social distancing in small groups. Several people agree with Tyler. Geraldine King, Susan John agree with Tyler, rip the Band-Aid off. Elizabeth Harden says customize employment, ... which is something, that's just an enhanced version of supported employment, just needing more time and more energy. So it's not excluded from what we currently have by any means. Elise Harden, we'll need more units and / time with folks, but this is going to be a great way to get individuals out of the quote unquote workshops, and we agree. It's a great way to kind of push to get into the final rule, settings rule, and get out of these workshops into smaller groups that are in the communities more. I mean,
It's final rule in COVID-19 compliant, right?
okay.
So if we go fee for service, you have all the risk, but you also have all the reward. So if you come up with ways to leverage existing rates and services and do more, you're going to be economically incentivized for that. Alternatively, if you're not one of those that are in that definition, you're going to get hammered by it potentially. I just did some analysis for different, well, Rufus can speak to SLP1 as an example, which we're not talking about residential, but we're losing $2 million a year on this. So if we flip that, you're losing $2 million a year. So anything that's a service unit, you really need to be focusing as executive to drive all that now. I mean, you may not have the economic incentive for it now, but you will at some point. Better to go ahead and have it now instead of waiting until the switch is flipped and you got to figure it all out then.
All we've got.
We've heard.
One other comment, sorry, if that's okay?
Yeah.
I left off my list, apologize. And it goes to the residential rate inclusive of the day component. Going forward, I just have a concern, and I'll just talk about Lawrence here. This is not a statewide thing. I won't speak for the state, but the training we're doing it, but to the unit time frame of 2 hours in the morning and 2 to 3 I think that's right in the afternoon. If we're going to extend that, I just have concerns about the ability for that. If it's questioned, audited, I mean that's a long time in a house to be doing focused training, as I understand it. So I think it sets us up. I think if we go forward with a model that is inclusive of a rate for residential and it contains day and we are flexible, sure, there can be, goals and those could be, done by the residential observations or whatever made sense. But I know you can't just give us money for nothing, but to set it up where it's unit based for day units in the house, long term, I'm just concerned about it.
Yeah, we, long range, I think the the idea everyone has is that we need to debundle the residential and day rates. You've got a lot of inherent issues there where, you know, in a fee-for-service world, if you're able to build a residential unit, you need to be able to build a day unit also if they go to the day program, because if they don't go to the day program, they're going to sit in the residence and you got to staff it with that residential rate. And there's some built-in financial issues there, and I think we already headed the 15-minute unit in July possibly anyways, right? We might have to do the 15-minute unit
For
for a
SLP?
day program in July anyways, right?
No, it's staying a day.
Huh?
That's staying at a day unit, or half day unit.
Okay. I thought
They talked about moving it to a day unit, a whole day unit,
Right.
because national codes are either a 15-minute unit or a whole day.
Huh.
And they talked about doing it to a whole day, but it wouldn't work with the billing system, so we're leaving it a half day.
I think there is a lot of interest in the 15-minute unit. The issue is making sure what the documentation looks like. You know, are you documenting something every 15 minutes or for, you know, an hour that's 4 units? So.
Yeah.
Right. Lois says we've seen the effectiveness and quality and meaningfulness of services as we have implemented small group settings, in some cases individualized service provision. It's not impossible, but we do need the units, definitions, and timeframes to be effective and sustainable. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to ask, is there any, we've heard positive, I know we got to end this meeting, but I'm interested in asking this real quick. We've heard folks say yes to the BAN BNI conversion. Is there anyone out there that wants to present the opposite view of that? That they don't think we should flip those if we can? Just need to make sure, I mean, it might be a vocal minority that says, okay. Well, I know it's been a long meeting.
This is Tricia Harrison. I represent the South Carolina Association of Advocates. This is a deja vu of what happened 10 years ago. And I went to the governor's office and said, we need $1.2 million to keep the agency from running a deficit. But I can't speak for my agency, my association, without talking to the board about this. But if y'all put this all on the people who live at home again, I expect that my board would be filing a lawsuit about that, because you can't again put all the burden on the people that live at home. What should be happening? I mean, I've run the numbers, and there is a 6.2% increase. So somebody has $40-something million sitting there for the year, and I'm sorry, I don't see the numbers. I think it was like 3.2 million extra a month. I need to find that. So there is money out there. In addition to that, the governor either has, or as soon as the legislature comes back, will have $180 million for COVID. So I just want y'all to know that I'll be meeting with my board, but if the burden goes on the people who live at home, that's an ADA violation, and there will be pushback. I just didn't want to sit here silent and let y'all think there wouldn't be a response to that. My suggestion would be, you have a board member, Dave Thomas, who has tremendous connections with the governor, with the Senate, with the House. So I think somebody needs to be looking at where that money is going.
All right, so I don't know what you mean about the burden on the at-home people. We're not affecting services for anybody. We're trying to take the shackles off the boards so that they have freedom to provide services without the financial considerations associated with those services. So I didn't quite understand that. And then on the FMAP, we agree. It's $40 or $50 million a year, and we want our money.
We're hunting that too.
The last number we got was a very, 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 very small fraction of that number. We have been meeting with, our state director has been communicating with Josh Baker constantly. We've been hammering him for a number. We're like, we need it, because we got to come up with something. The year's getting away from us. We still don't know that number. I agree. I'm going to try and call their CFO over at HHS and figure out what's going on. And I need some background on where this money is going if it's not coming to us, so that we can understand why we wouldn't get the full FMAP that we would expect to receive based on the numbers that you've run. We agree.
Hey, that Chris, I think all of these people, you got 120 people on the line, all of these people, instead of telling them you're going to take money from them, because their residential is costing more than they're getting, we need to be doing grassroots and going to legislators, and the money is there. The money needs to be, and one of the things I'll be doing this afternoon is talking to CMS. So I think that's a more logical approach than hitting these boards when they are underwater and they're having to increase their staffing with COV. I think the approach needs to be find the money and use it. It has to be used as intended. But anyway, I'll be following up. I'd love to talk with you about it, Chris, and I think there's resources that need to be sought.
Thank you.
All right, well, we're going on, what, 2
Hour and a half.
2.5 hours?
2.5 hours.
Yeah.
All right, so if there's any other follow-up, if you would email me or Pat, we'll be glad to get back to you. If you need any technical assistance with things too, Debbie, I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.